could have begun in a portion of the valley where the ground was not marshy. After the second conflict, 10,000 Edomites were hurled to their deaths from a crag, but the location of that crag is not stated. 2ch 25. 11, 12. In the first battle, David and Joab, evidently with Abishai in charge of at least some of the troops, struck down 18,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt. 2ch 13. 1k 11. 15. 1ch 18. 12. PS 60. Later, King Amaziah 858-830 BCE attacked and slaughtered 10,000 Edomites in the same valley, following this with the execution of 10,000 Edomites who were captured, as well as the seizing of the Edomite stronghold Selah. 2ch 14. 7. 2ch 25. 11, 12. See Edom, Edomites. Salt herb, Heb. Malmiddle.luake. This term is mentioned only once in scripture as a food deed and by those of little account. Job 30. For the original language word is considered to be derived from a root meaning salt, and it has also been translated salt word as, at, da, cresfen, grass dye, and mallow skj, la, rs. The rendering mallows appears to have resulted from the similarity between the Hebrew word malmiddle.luake and the Greek word mermiddle.lokhe, which is believed to be related to the English designation mallow. However, at Job 30. For the translators of the Greek Septuagint did not use mermiddle.lokhe, but harli-middle.ma salt herbs, elixex, bagster, and harli-middle.ma, like malmiddle.luake, is thought to refer either to the salty taste of the plant or to the region where it grows. The plant most frequently suggested as corresponding to the malmiddle.luake of the Bible is sea purslane or shrub Uraca triplex halamus. Ordinarily this bushy shrub grows 1 to 2 meters, 3 to 6.5 feet high. The plant has small, thick, sour-tasting leaves, and in the spring, it bears tiny purple flowers. It grows in saline soil. Salt sea. One of the biblical designations for the large lake or sea now generally known as the Dead Sea. The Salt Sea Yam HaMelah forms the southern termination of the Jordan River. Name. The first and most frequent designation of this sea in the Bible, Salt Sea, is quite appropriate, since it is one of the saltiest bodies of water on the earth. GE 14. 3. New 34. 3, 12. Jos 15. 2, 5. It is also called the Sea of the Arabida 4. 49. 2ch 14. 25, being in the huge reef of which the Araba is a part. Sometimes, though, the name Otextoi acute Muritra longo, Salt Sea 844. The main part of the sea in the N reaches a depth of about 400 meters, 1,300 feet. The surface of the water is about 400 meters, 1,300 feet below the level of the Mediterranean Sea, making it the lowest spot on Earth. The East Oran of Dalisan consists mainly of sandstone cliffs that rise steeply to the plateau of Moab. Several gorges, the most prominent being the Arnon, cut through these barren hills and empty water into the sea. To the E and S of the peninsula lies a plain that is well watered with streams. The S end of the sea is a flat salt marsh. On the W side of the sea the limestone cliffs are not as precipitous as those on the E. These Judean hills are more terraced and receding, but very desolate, since no permanent streams cut through to the sea. The beach and slopes near the shore allow travel along the W side. On a high mesa opposite Elisan is Masada, the fortress that Herod strengthened and where, in 73 CE, the Romans defeated the last of the Jews who were holding out against the Roman army. Farther in is the oasis on Gedi. At the end, the Jordan empties into the sea, mixing its fresh water with the extremely salty water of the sea. Water. The water of the sea is unique in that it is about 9 times as salty as the oceans. The salt sea has no outlet, so most of the water coming into it evaporates in the intense heat, leaving behind more mineral salts. The salt concentration is such that no fish, even saltwater varieties, are able to live. The few fish in the brackish water where fresh water mixes with the salt water are killed if they are swept into the sea proper. This adds meaning to Ezekiel's description of a torrent flowing from Jehovah's temple into the eastern sea and healing the upper portion so that it abounded in fish like the Mediterranean Sea and could support a flourishing fishing industry. S47. 8-10, 18 The high density of the water causes objects to float easily, and it contributes to a smooth surface, because the water is not ruffled by light breezes. Sodom and Gomorrah. It is generally believed that Sodom and Gomorrah were located near the southern end of the Salt Sea. The kings of these cities were among those who battled in the lower plain of Siddim, that is, the Salt Sea, and the way this is phrased suggests that the low plain of Siddim came to be covered by the Salt Sea. GE 14. 3. The region of Sodom and Gomorrah were limestone cliffs on the west shore of the Salt Sea. Samaria 845 Lot settled was well watered, like the Garden of Jehovah. GE 13. 10-12 Even today, in the plain along this shore, vegetation is abundant, and wheat, barley, dates, and vines can be grown there. The large amounts of bitumen and salt, especially in this southern section, also match the biblical account of Sodom and Gomorrah. GE 14. 10. 19. 24-26. Salu. A Simeonite whose son Zimri was executed for immorality on the plains of Moab. New 25. 14. Salvation. Sea ransom. Savior. Samaria March belonging to the clan Shema. 1. The city that King Omri began to build about the middle of the 10th century BCE. It served as the capital of the northern kingdom of Israel for more than 200 years. Omri purchased the mountain, on top of which this city was built, from Shema, for 2 talents of silver, a price equal to $13,212. 1 Kai 16. 23, 24 The mountain as well as the city continued to be called after the name of this former owner. Am 4. 1. 6. 1. Location. Samaria is identified with ruins called Shomron adjacent to the Arab village Sabastia, about 55 kilometers 34 mi of Jerusalem, and 11 kilometers 7 mi of Shechem. It was in Manasseh's territory. When Samaria was described as the head of Ephraim, the reference was to its position as the capital of the 10-tribe kingdom, Ephraim being the dominant tribe of that kingdom. Issa 7. 9 Samaria was near to, if not the same location as, Shemer in the mountainous region of Ephraim, the home of Judge Tola, who served during the period of the judges. JG 10. 1, 2. The rather flat top of the Samarian hill, about 2 kilometers 1 mi across from E to W, was an ideal location for a city. The abrupt rise of about 90 meters, 300 feet from the plain below made the location easy to defend. The view too was magnificent, for to the N, E, and S were higher peaks, while to the W the land gently sloped down from an altitude of 463 meters, 1,519 feet to the blue Mediterranean, 34 kilometers 21 mi away. Much of Samaria's history is bound up with the wayward record of the 14 kings of Israel from Omri to Hoshi. 1 Kai 16. 28, 29. 22. 51, 52. 2 Kai 3. 1, 2. 10. 35, 36. 13. 1, 10. 14. 23. 15. 8, 13, 14, 17, 23, 25, 27. 17. 1. During time of Ahab. After the death of Omri, his son Ahab continued the city's building program during his 22-year reign. This included the construction of a Baal temple, the setting up a Baal altar, and the erection of the sacred pole of worship. All evidence, in this newly created city, of the Canaanite religion sponsored by Ahab's Phoenician wife Jezebel. 1 Kai 16. 28-33. 18. 18, 19. 2 Kai 13. 6 Ahab also embellished Samaria with a beautiful house of ivory that was possibly furnished with couches of ivory similar to those referred to by the prophet Amos 100 years later. 1 Kai 22. 39. Am 3. 12, 15. 6. 1. 4 archaeologists have found more than 500 fragments of ivory, many artistically carved, in the ruins of Samaria. During the latter part of Ahab's reign, the Syrian king Ben-Hadad II laid siege to Samaria, vowing he would strip it so completely that there would not be sufficient dust to fill the hands of those in his army. However, the Israelites were given the victory in order that Ahab should know that Jehovah is God Almighty. 1 Kai 20. 1-21 In a second encounter less than a year later, when Ben-Hadad was forced to surrender, Ahab let him go on the promise that cities would be returned to Israel and streets in Damascus would be assigned to Ahab the same as Ben-Hadad's father had assigned himself streets in Samaria. 1 Kai 20. 26-34 These streets evidently had been for the establishment of bazaars, or markets, to promote the commercial interests of Ben-Hadad's father. Nevertheless, Ahab returned to Samaria sad and dejected, for, since he had spared Ben-Hadad's life, Jehovah told him he would forfeit his own. 1 Kai 20. 35-43 This forfeiture came about in the third year after that when Ahab invited Judean king Otex to execute Muritra Samaria 846 princes and aldermen residing at Samaria, arranged for the beheading of Ahab's 70 remaining sons. No, then, Jehu declared, that nothing of Jehovah's word will fall unfulfilled to the earth that Jehovah has spoken against the house of Ahab. And Jehovah himself has done what he spoke by means of his servant Elijah. 2 Kai 10. 1-12, 17 Other pronouncements of Jehovah by his prophets Elijah and Elisha, and the events connected with them, occurred in Samaria and its vicinity. For example, Ahab's son Ahijah fell through the grating in his palace roof chamber in Samaria 2 Kai 1. 2-17 The Syrian leper Naaman came to Samaria seeking a cure 2 Kai 5. 1-14 And the Syrian military force, sent out to capture Elisha, was mentally blinded and led to Samaria, where the men were fed and sent home 2 Kai 6. 13-23 During the reign of Ahab's son Jehoram, the Syrians besieged Samaria, causing such a famine that some persons ate their own children. But then, in fulfillment of Elisha's prophecy, the famine was broken in one night when Jehovah caused the Syrians to flee in panic and leave behind their foodstuffs. 2 Kai 6. 24-29 7. 1-20 Rival of Jerusalem. From time to time the rivalry and animosity between Samaria and Jerusalem, the respective capitals of the northern and southern kingdoms, burst into open warfare. On one occasion the king of Judah, when about to attack Edom, sent 100,000 mercenaries of Israel back home on orders from Jehovah. And even though paid 100 silver talents $660,600, these Israelites were so enraged that they raided and plundered Judean towns from Samaria clear to Beth-horon. 2ch 25. 5-13 The king of Judah, flushed with victory over Edom, then picked a quarrel with the king of Samaria, a quarrel that was not settled until all the gold and silver from the house of Jehovah and the king's treasury in Jerusalem had been carried off to Samaria. 2 Kai 14. 8-14 2ch 25. 17-24 years later, however, after a defeat of King Ahaz of Judah, in order to escape Jehovah's anger, the men of Israel returned certain captives and booty that had been taken to Samaria. 2ch 28. 5-15 The city of Samaria was eventually destroyed for its idolatry, moral corruption, and continued disregard for God's laws and principles. 2 Kai 17. 7-18 Repeatedly Jehovah warned her rulers and their subjects by the mouths of such prophets as Isaiah 8. 4. 9. 9, Hosea 7. 1. 8. 5, 6. 10. 5, 7. 13. 16, Amos 3. 9. 8. 14, Micah 1. 1, 5, 6, and others 1 Kai 20. 13, 28, 35-42. 22. 8 as well as Elijah and Elisha. Later on, after her destruction, other prophets referred to Samaria as a warning example to those who would reject Jehovah's instructions. 2 Kai 21. 10-13. J 23. 13. S 16. 46, 51, 53, 55. 23. 4, 33. Later history. In 742 BCE Shalmaneser V, king of Assyria, laid siege to Samaria, but the city was able to hold out for nearly 3 years. When it finally fell in 740 BCE, many of the leading inhabitants were deported into exile and settled in Mesopotamia and Media. Whether credit for the ultimate capture of the city goes to Shalmaneser V or to his successor Sargon II is still not a settled question. 2 Kai 17. 1-6, 22, 23. 18. 9-12. See Sargon. With the fall of Samaria to the Assyrians, the Bible's detailed history of the city ends. Thereafter, mention of the city is often, though not always, 2 Kai 23. 18. Agate. 5, made by way of a reminder of what becomes of those who rebel against Jehovah. 2 Kai 18. 34. 21. 13. Issa 10. 9-11. 36. 19. The Bible relates that after the destruction of Jerusalem and the subsequent assassination of Gedaliah, 80 men from Shechem, Shiloh, and Samaria came down toward Mizpah and encountered Ishmael the assassin. Ishmael slaughtered many of these men, sparing some of them who promised to show him where they had treasures of wheat, barley, oil, and honey hidden. Jah 41. 1-9. Secular records relate some of Samaria's history from and after the days of Alexander O Textoi Acute Miritra Longo, Samaritan 847. In Roman times its splendor was due to the building program of Herod the Great, who renamed the city Sebaste, a feminine Greek form for the Latin name Augustus, in honor of Augustus, the first emperor. Today the Arabic name Sebastia preserves the name Herod gave it. It is therefore not surprising that excavations at this site have uncovered the remains of a number of different periods in its history. Some of these remains are from the days of Israel's kings. 2. The territory of the 10-tribe northern kingdom of Israel. The name of its capital city, Samaria, was sometimes applied to this entire area. For example, when Ahab was called the king of Samaria, it was not with the restricted meaning of being king of the city only, but in the broader sense as king of the 10 tribes. 1 Kai 21. 1 So, 2. The cities of Samaria refer to those scattered throughout the 10 tribes, not to towns clustered around the capital. 2 Kai 23. 19. This same expression recorded at 1 Kai 13. 32 as if used before the city Samaria was built, if not prophetic, may have been introduced by the compiler of the king's account. The famine in Samaria in the days of Ahab was extensive throughout the whole kingdom of Samaria and, in fact, even took in Phoenicia, extending at least from the torrent valley of Cherith, of the Jordan, to Zarephath on the Mediterranean. 1 Kai 17. 1-12. 18. 2, 5, 6. Similarly, the restoration promise regarding the mountains of Samaria must have embraced the whole of the realm of Samaria. Jah 31. 5. Tiglath-Pileser III seems to have been the first to uproot Israelites from Samaria's territory, some prominent Reubenites, Gadites, and Manassites from of the Jordan being among those moved to Assyria. 1 Ch 5. 6, 26. When the northern kingdom finally fell, more were taken into exile. 2 Kai 17. 6. But this time the king of Assyria replaced these Israelites with people from other parts of his realm, a transplanting policy continued by Esarhaddon and Asshurbanipal. 2 Kai 17. 24. Es 4. 2, 10. Lions began to multiply in the land, probably because the land, or a large part of it, had lain waste for a time. Compare X 23. 29. The settlers doubtless felt, superstitiously, that it was because they did not understand how to worship the God of the land. Therefore the king of Assyria sent back a calf-worshipping Israelite priest from exile. He taught the settlers about Jehovah, but in the same manner as Jeroboam had done, so that they learned something about Jehovah but actually continued to worship their own false gods. 2 Kai 17. 24-41. 3. the district through which Jesus occasionally traveled and into which the apostles later brought the message of Christianity. Its boundaries are not definitely known today, but, generally, it lay between Galilee and the N and Judea in the S, and it extended from the Jordan to the coastal plains of the Mediterranean. For the most part the district embraced the territories once belonging to the tribe of Ephraim and half the tribe of Manasseh of the Jordan. From time to time, on his way to and from Jerusalem, Jesus passed through Samaria, situated as it was between the districts of Judea and Galilee. Luke 17:11. Job 4:3-6. But for the most part he refrained from preaching in this territory, even telling the 12 whom he sent out to avoid Samaritan cities and, instead, to go continually to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, that is, the Jews. Mount 10:5-6. However, this restriction covered only a limited time, for just before his ascension to heaven, Jesus told his disciples they should carry the good news not only to Samaria but to the most distant part of the earth. Acts 1:8-9. So it was that when persecution broke out in Jerusalem the disciples, Philip in particular, took up the ministry in Samaria. Peter and John were later sent there, resulting in further expansion of Christianity. Acts 8:1-17-25. 9:31-15. 3. Samaritan o textoi acute miritra longo. Psalm 848. Jeroboam's efforts at alienating the 10 tribes from Jehovah's worshippers centered in Jerusalem. For about 250 years after the nation had split into 2 kingdoms, the God-ordained Levitical priests were replaced by a man-appointed priesthood, which, in turn, led the kingdom of Israel in the practice of demoralizing idolatry. 1 Kai 12:28-33. 2 Kai 17:7-17. 2 Ch 11:13-15. 13. 8. 9. Then came the fall of the northern kingdom. The pagan immigrants brought in from Babylon, Cuthah, Ava, Hamath, and Sepharvaim were worshippers of many deities. Succoth-Benoth, Nergal, Ashima, Nabaz, Ratake, Adramelech, and Anamelech. Although they learned something about Jehovah through instruction by a priest of the Jeroboam priesthood, yet, as Samaria had done with the golden calves, they continued to worship their false gods, generation after generation. 2 Kai 17:24-41. Josiah's extensive efforts to rid these northern communities of their idol worship, nearly 100 years after Samaria fell, had no more lasting effect than similar reforms made by him in the southern kingdom of Judah. 2 Kai 23:4-20. 2 Ch 34. 6, 7. In 537 BCE a remnant of the 12 tribes returned from Babylonian exile prepared to rebuild Jehovah's temple in Jerusalem. As 1. 3. 2. 1:70. It was then that the Samaritans, who were already in the land when the Israelites arrived and who were described as adversaries of Judah and Benjamin, approached Zerubbabel and the older men, saying, "Let us build along with you. For, just like you, we search for your God, and to him we are sacrificing since the days of Esarhaddon the king of Assyria, who brought us up here." As for 1:2. This claim of devotion to Jehovah, however, proved to be only lip service, for when Zerubbabel declined their offer, the Samaritans did everything they could to prevent the building of the temple. After all their concerted efforts at harassment and intimidation had failed, they then made false accusations in a letter to the Persian emperor and succeeded in getting a government decree issued that put a stop to the construction for a number of years. As for 3-24. In the middle of the 5th century BCE when Nehemiah began repairing Jerusalem's walls, Sanballat governor of Samaria